Some men don't fall to bullets. They get consumed by silence, by the burdens of words that they ought to have uttered but kept inside, by walking away when they should have stood. Ever wake up at night wondering if you passed up your one opportunity to do something right? Will Morgan had. His name hadn't meant anything to anybody in years. The world didn't care if he existed, it just continued on. One day he'd had a wife. The next, just a clump of soil out behind the barn to indicate she'd ever existed. That morning, Will wasn't looking for trouble, just repairing another broken fence, when he spotted it. A sack, slung crookedly under a low cottonwood, gently swaying in the wind. The kind of thing a man overlooks if he's smart. Trouble, after all, doesn't always make an entrance. But this didn't sit right. Too still, too quiet. He drew nearer, narrowing his eyes under the brim of his hat. The sack wasn't properly tied, more dumped and half-grabbed. The burlap was sun-faded and unraveling, dark smears spreading along the bottom. Then he heard it. A sound you never forget after it's been seared into your brain. Not a scream, not even a cry, just breathing. Weak, human. Will drew his sword slowly. The sack moved. In it was a woman not more than 25. Her clothes hung in shreds. Her face was cracked and blistered by the sun. Lips split and bleeding. One wrist still tied with rusty wire. She did not beg, did not even blink. She merely regarded him and spoke, her voice already half gone. "Kill me quick!" Will froze. Then he knelt, pulling back the thin blanket covering her. What he saw twisted his stomach. It wasn't fresh, but it was deliberate. Whoever had done this hadn't wanted her to die quick. They'd wanted her to vanish. His ranch was nothing. A creaky porch with 2 vacant chairs, a roof that creaked when the wind picked up, dust covering everything. But to her, it was the nearest thing to security she had in years. Will never inquired as to her name. Never inquired about who did this and why. Perhaps it was because of this that she stayed. She wouldn't lie in the bed, opted for the floor beside the stove instead, as if she thought the mattress would come after her. Spun at the hiss of the kettle. Stared at the door like it would be flung open any moment. Held her silence most days. Only accepted whatever Will poured into the tin cup and nibbled at her bread as if it could poison her. Nevertheless, she remained. Will wasn't big on words either. He just kept his hands full mending fences, taking care of stock, leaving her supper like it was no big thing. And perhaps, in a sense, it wasn't. Perhaps the silence between them grew into its own type of speech. 7 days went by before she came outside. Will was splitting wood when he saw her. Hair pulled back in a rag of cloth, shoulders held back but rigid, as if she had to remember how to stand up straight. She never said a word, just grabbed a log. He didn't stop her. They worked in silence. 2 individuals who had exhausted all conversation long before they ever encountered each other. That evening, when the fire burned down, she said one sentence. "You didn't touch me." Will looked at her but didn't answer. She nodded once, as if that was all the response she required. That evening, she ate her meal for the first time. Every single bite. She even smiled, not broad, not easy, but genuine. If this were it, perhaps it would have been a story of healing, of second chances. But peace never lasts out here. It began with hoof prints, deep, new ones by the south fence line. Will saw them at dawn. They weren't his, and they sure as hell weren't from town. He didn't say anything to her, just inspected his rifle and rode the border twice that day. She sat nearer to the fire that evening, claimed she couldn't sleep, claimed something was wrong. Then Will saw it, engraved into the inside of her wrist. Not a scar, a rough tattoo. 3 letters, JKS. He'd seen it before. Years ago, outside Bisbee, Will had run into a drunk who boasted too loudly about things no man should ever boast of. Will had just walked away back then. Figured if he didn't see it, he wouldn't get sucked into someone else's badness. But now those same 3 letters, JKS, were seared into her skin, and that made it his issue. The following morning, Will rode into Tombstone. Not to speak, just to listen. Rumor had it, 3 young women had disappeared in the past 4 months. 2 from Texas, 1 from Santa Fe. All under 25. All vanished without a peep. And no one had done a damn thing. The sheriff assured him there were no witnesses, no evidence, and no reason to fan hysteria. Will nodded, thanked him, and rode out as if a man with his mind clear. But something had broken within him. This time it was not only about justice. It was about her. That evening, in the dim light of an oil lamp, she asked him why he'd gone to town. Will refused to look up, continued to scrub the barrel of his rifle, and said softly, "Sometimes bad men need to know someone's still watching." Her hand touched his briefly, but in that instant Will knew. This was not merely her second chance. It was his as well. And perhaps you know how things work in this world. Perhaps you've noticed how rarely justice comes riding in with a badge. So stay, because the tale's just getting hot. Will didn't charge in like a dime novel hero. He walked with intent, as silent as dust, meandering up and down dry creek beds and skinny canyons known only to locals and coyotes. He came upon the camp at sunset, a crooked cabin wedged against a cliff, a wisp of smoke from the chimney, a creaking of laughter in the cracks, the sort of laughter that crawled on your skin. He tied his horse to a branch low over the trail and moved along the back of it. Waited, listened. When the bottle clinked the third time and voices started to lag, he moved in. The first man leapt to his feet, too swiftly, and took the butt of Will's rifle squarely in the chest. The second started to reach for his belt. Will blew a warning round clean through the lantern, filling the room with smoke and sparks. The third let go of his knife before it had even left the table. No one said anything. Will strode across the room and scooped the girl up from the corner. She looked anywhere but at his eyes. She didn't need to. He draped her over his arm, turned to the men, and left them with words they'd not soon forget. "She's not yours. She never was. Touch another girl, and there won't be a second warning." He brought her to Tombstone. The sheriff was poised to debate until Will spilled a broken blade and the girl's bloody dress on his desk. That was sufficient to arouse the law. When Will rode back home, she stood by the gate. No questions.
No tears.
Just a glance that said possibly, perhaps not all men were terrible. And for the first time in years, Will didn't feel empty. He felt as though he'd taken a stand. Justice doesn't happen overnight. But when it does, it stays. It wasn't a romance. Not the paperback kind or the kind hushed beneath a porch light. But something, yes. She remained not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Days eased. She planted herbs in the garden, groomed the horses without wincing, even hummed once while sweeping the porch. Will saw but said nothing. Some things lose their enchantment if you say them too early. He still rose before the sun, still mended fences. But now there was a second mug on the table each morning, a second pair of boots beside the door that didn't belong to him. She still slept in the room down the hall, and that was enough. There were nights they sipped coffee out under the stars, and said nothing, but brought something more vocal than words to fill the silence. One night, when the sun dripped red across the hills, she asked, "Why did you return for me?" He paused before responding. "Because someone had to." She nodded. That was enough. Life doesn't always award us what we are owed. But sometimes, it provides us with someone who understands we are better than that, and that can change everything. Will never asked her to remain. She never vowed she would. And yet each morning she opened the door, and each evening she returned home. Love does not always come like fire. Sometimes it comes softly, like rain on weathered wood, like forgiveness, like beginning again. Now let me ask you, what would you do if a stranger appeared at your doorstep in need of something more than a bed for the night? Would you turn them away? Or would you open the door and possibly salvage a piece of yourself along the way? If this tale touched something in you, if it reminded you that redemption is still relevant in a world this dirty, then click that like button. And if you're a believer in stories with heart, grit, and honesty, subscribe. We have more to say. Some have already occurred. Some await. And maybe one of them will be yours.